Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. I really like where 1 Corinthians chapter 3 lands in our reading, our overall reading plan, because it comes at the end of a very long section in which we've been dealing with the temple of God for quite some time. We saw that a big chunk of 2 Chronicles is dedicated to the temple as we read about David preparing for the temple, for the construction of the temple. And then in 1 Chronicles, we saw that a lot of time is spent explaining the situation surrounding and the information including the construction of Solomon's temple, which was a glorious temple. And then as we went through the stories of the kings, we saw that the temple oftentimes was a main character in that section of 2 Chronicles. Yes, there was focus on what the kings did, but there was also a focus on the temple, whether unclean things were being brought into the temple being cleansed whenever reforms were taking place. Repairs were also a main emphasis when it came to the temple. We've just been hearing about the temple quite often as we've gone through our Old Testament reading, and we even see it in Ezra as we've gone through the book of Ezra. We've seen, of course, the altar being reconstructed, but also the foundation of the temple being laid. And in our reading today, the construction of the second temple being completed, and this temple being consecrated, and even the Passover being observed at this temple. So a lot of focus on the temple for quite some time in our reading. And 1 Corinthians 3 lands on the very day that we read about the temple, the second temple being completed. And I think that it is very appropriate that it lands on this same day, because what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians chapter 3 is the fact that we as the church are the temple of God. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 16, it says, "Do you not know that you are a temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwells in you? If any man destroys the temple of God, God will destroy him, for the temple of God is holy, and that is what you are." That's just an amazing statement to me. The temple of God is holy, and that is what you are. If ever that statement was ever impressed on our hearts, it should be today as we read it, given that we've spent so much time reading about the temple under the Old Covenant, and just how holy it was when Solomon prayed, when his temple was constructed and consecrated. He talked about how this temple would be very, very special, that it would even play a part in people's prayers as people prayed towards the temple. He prayed that their prayers would be answered whenever they turned to the temple, and as such, were turning to the Lord. But the temple was a very holy place, and that's very much emphasized as we've gone through 1st and 2nd Chronicles, and even in Ezra, in the book of Ezra as well. And now Paul is saying something very spectacular, very magnificent, and that is that we as a church are the temple of God today, and that temple is holy. And he says, we should be very careful in the way that we treat this temple, because it's very holy, and that's what we are, the temple of God. And so as we gather together today as God's people, as the church, we're gathering together as God's temple. And it's not just some social club. It's not some place where we just gather and we kind of talk about things that we agree on, and then we all go home. This is no small matter that we are coming together as the temple of God. As we've gone through and we've read these various passages about the temple, we know that is not a small thing. The temple is a very, very holy place. And when we come together as God's people, we are gathered in holiness. And it's something that is very special, something that is very wonderful. And we should view it as such. And so when we come together, we should have our minds in the right place, our hearts in the right place. We should understand that our relationships should be in unity with one another. We should come together with this awe and this reverence of God as we're coming together as God's temple. And the reason we're called God's temple is because he says in verse 16, we have the Spirit of God dwelling in us. And so that, if nothing else, makes us holy and makes what we're doing when we gather together as a church a very holy activity. And so as we go to church today, as we worship with other brothers and sisters, let's understand that we are walking on holy ground when we come together. And we need to have to say it again, our minds in the right place, our hearts in the right place, and really concentrate on what we're doing and really be in a state of awe and reverence before God as we come together. So let's let that be in the forefront of our minds as we worship God today. So with that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.